Howdy, Ben for the Better Podcast, and today we are going to look at some Necromunda 2026. More specifically, now we started playing games, now we started getting the gangs to the table. Today we're going to look at the things you need to know when building your gang. Okay, so what we are going to look at today as we have a look at building a gang in Necromunda 2026 are a few very important things. So, building a gang, what the restrictions are, how to do it, and things you need to know. Secondly, how to add stuff later. Necromunda is ideally a campaign game system, and when you build out your gang to begin with, you are not, I don't think, going to be able to get everything that you want. So it's really important to know at what point later you can add more stuff, at what point later you can add more cool stuff, and how you go about it. I think that's a really important part of any Necromunda campaign, any Necromunda gang is, okay, this is what I'm starting with. What else do I want to buy later on, and how do I do it? And then the last, but I would say the most important thing is the types and specialists. So in this edition of Necromunda, there's a lot of gangers that can immediately become specialists, which means they get one free skill. Now, that's massively impactful because when you're building your crew, there's going to be some immediate skill bonuses you can take. Like this person's going to be able to do this person's going to be able to do this, and kind of things you want to be aware of as you're building out your gang. Okay, so let's look at how to build a gang. Now, the beautiful thing about Necromunda is that Munda's a beautiful thing. No, is that the commissioner of a Necromunda League can basically choose. So if you got together with your friends and you're like, actually, can we do a 1500 credit gang? You absolutely can. But most Necromunda sort of seasons and campaigns are going to start 1,000. That's what the book says. That's what it's kind of always been. It just feels about right. So you need one leader model in every gang, with the exception of the Blades of the Matriarch and the Forge Haulers from the starter set. Those guys have no champions. They have no leaders. You have the guys. So every other gang, you are going to need a leader model. Kind of pretty much how it works. Right, then you can have as many gangers as you like. As far as I'm concerned, there's no limit except to what you can buy. Now, there's a limit of how many players you can actually, how many fighters, how many models you can actually use in a game. Most scenarios, the cap is going to be 10. But I'd say the average is kind of like 7 or 8 models. So when you're building your gang, try to have around 7 or 8 models. Anything less than that, and you're kind of pretending to be a Spira. Anything more than that, and you may not get to use everybody every time. Then you can take 0 to X champions, brutes, and hangers on. So when it comes to it, we've got the bit at the end where we look at the fighter subtypes. But basically what this means is you have to have a bunch of gangers, but you can't have more champions, brutes, or hangers-on than you have gangers. So if you want 3 champions, you've got to have at least 3 other dudes in your gang to balance it out. It's actually really straightforward. It's just one of those things you've got to be aware of. You can take pets, but pets count as war gear. So this is like the Sphinx cat, the Cyber Mastiffs, the crocodiles that the Goliath guys have. You can take pets. They will function basically as a little buddy to whoever the gang owner is. So they activate with them and stuff. So you don't get to kind of fudge through the animals of Farthing Underhive. You don't get to do that. And then everything in the beginning, I'm sure there's going to be some exception in one of the lists I've not noticed, but basically when you're building a list, it says equipment, when added to the gang roster, purchase weapons and war gear from the blah 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 equipment list. Then it says during the course of a campaign, you can take it from the blah 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 equipment list or the trading post. So to begin with, everything's out of the list that your gang has, and then after that, and this is why we're going to talk about how to add stuff later, you can find more guns and more gangers to go with it, because the trading post goes live after game 1. Okay, so for each ganger, each fighter on your roster, they can have up to 3 weapons. They can have as much war gear as they like. Grenades aren't weapons, they're war gear. Fine. I mean, yeah, okay. Asterix weapons take 2 slots. So if you picked up the core set, that's the Chimeric Sting, the double punch fist, that's the big axe for the Forge Hauler. It's basically heavy-ish weapons, so like a heavy stubber counts as 2 slots. basically it kind of attributes how many hands you're going to be using for these. So when you're kind of thinking you can deploy a guy with 3 weapons, but you know your big axe takes 2 weapons, well, that means you can still have a bolt pistol, you can still have a stub gun, you can still kind of fill it out with that third bit. The challenge is going to be buying everything you want, like I said at the beginning, but you kind of have to build that in. Although you can give guys more weapons, and you can use different alternate loadouts, which we'll talk about in a minute. However, every weapon can have an accessory, so we're talking like a scope or like a disco ball, some nice furry dice, lots of things you can add, but every weapon can only have 1 extra bit. But when you're building out your gang, you have the stash. And the stash is your gang stash. So it's all your weapons and stuff that aren't currently loaded up onto a guy. So if Steve, Bill, and Bob have all got one of your bolt guns and you've got a spare bolt gun, it's probably in your stash. And you can buy things and add it to your stash. You can sell things from your stash, and unallocated gear all goes into your stash. If one of your gangers dies, for the most part, their weapons and stuff kind of end up in the stash. Now, model cards. This is a really important part of this version of Necromunda, and I think it was the last one as well, although there was Yak Tribe and Munda Manager that kind of you got around it. You can still get around it by using those systems to kind of keep your roster on there. But the way that the gangers work, it's really best to have a card or a thing laid out for each model, because each of your gangers gets a card. Now, you can have multiple cards for your ganger. So let's say Steve, you've got him and he's got a bolter and some stuff in one, but you also give him a heavy stubber on a different one. You can give them different loadouts. You can only ever use one of each ganger, but if they've got enough weapons, so that you kind of like, right, he's got 4 weapons, he's going to have 3 in mode A and 3 in mode B, and you can gear them up in multiple ways if you want to. I guess it's cheaper to do that than it is to have extra gangers. So like flame weapons and things like that, you may have, some modes where you want longer range weapons, or some modes where you kind of like, right, all of my gangers have got double pistol weapon loadouts, but they've also got long range weapon loadouts. I could see that being quite useful so that you can kind of have different loadouts. But in the game, you can only use 1 card per ganger. So as it comes to like running a campaign, and sometimes when it comes to your mission, you're going to have to randomly pick. Before you randomly pick, you go, right, do I want heavy bolter Steve or do I want big axe Steve? Which of those do I want to pick from? You put him in the pile, and then maybe Steve will turn up with the weapon that you've chosen. So it's important to have model cards for each of the gangers. Okay, so the post cycle. This is where you advance your gang, and the reason we're going to touch on it very briefly now is because, like I said, you build your gang and you're going to want to add more. People are going to die. You're going to want to sell their weapons. You're going to want to recruit more dudes. And more importantly, some of your guys are going to get advancements as well. So after a game, you've got a few core steps. One is post-cycle actions. This is where you can send people to the trading post. You can send them to work. You can send them to get pizza. You can take dead bodies to get revived. That's where you kind of send them on their each individual non-combat missions. Then you've got the collect income part. So everyone's gone out and done some stuff. You've now got lots of money. And what happens when you get lots of money? You want to update your roster because it's time to upgrade and spend that money. So advancements. This is the point at which the guys who've got their XP, they level up, they get new skills, they become promoted, they have great career aspirations, that kind of stuff. Then you go to the trading post, and this is where you can get new gangers and new money. Not new money, new gear. But when it comes to the trading post, you can access more exciting gear with trading point costs. So trading point 1 or trading post 2 by sending your leader to the trading post. That gives you 2 points to spend, or a champion or champions, they give you 1 point to spend as well. There's other ways to boost it up, but if you want to buy a rare weapon, you're going to need to send basically the gangers with a big reputation, because they're going to have access to more things than others. The interesting thing is that the 2 starter boxes, where there's no champions and there's no leaders in the starter box, you can never buy trading post rare items, so TP1 plus, until they've leveled up, which is interesting. But the idea is if you want some rare ammunition or some extra weapons and stuff like that, you need to go to the trading post and pick them up. And then, yeah, you can redistribute your equipment. This is the point at which you update your gang cards and kind of share the wealth around. And then once you've done with all that, you clean house. So once your dead gangers have had their weapons given away to different people, you've brought new gangers in and upgraded them and given them their weapons and stuff like that, you get everything else off, and then you lock in ready for your next game. Okay, so we've talked about how much you can buy and honestly how you can buy it. There's a couple of things you kind of want to know as you are building out your list. There's a lot of different gangs in Necromunda, a lot of different gangs, and there's a lot of interesting names and rules and things that I really think is worth having a quick flick through just so that you are set up when you're building your list. You're like, what the heck does this mean? All right, so first of all, these are the fighter subtypes. So leader, like we said, everybody gets a leader. They have the inspiring skill, which means when they're activated, they can use the group activation for free as a free action. So that means that they've got the opportunity to activate a few people at the same time as them, essentially within a 3-inch bubble. Very, very, very useful. And basically, dudes within 12 inches of them can use their cool stat for nerve tests. So as you start losing gangers or as other things happen, if your leader is within a foot and you can see him, you can use their leadership to kind of not run away. Then you've got champions who are mini leaders. They also have the inspiring skill, so they can also bubble activate, but they have their 6-inch bubble basically for leadership tests instead of the 12-inch. Now remember, leaders and champions are also really good for buying rare stuff. So if you can take them, it's always worth doing it. That group activation is really wicked. The little bubble of higher leadership is going to be useful too, and being able to buy cool stuff. So leaders and champions are kind of where it's at. Then you've got the bog standard ganger, and a ganger is just a ganger until they're promoted to a champion at 37 XP. This is really important as your campaign goes on. Remember that rule that you can't have more champions, hangers on and stuff than you have gangers. If you get promoted, you need to double check, because otherwise some of your champions might have to leave, or you might have to go on a recruiting spree and get some more gangers for you. Then you've got specialists. Now, a lot of model types have multiple. So you'll have ganger, specialist, champion. There's a lot of these that can kind of be smushed together, and specialists are, I think, one of the biggest upgrade to this edition. And this is why we're going through these, is because gangers with the specialist, they get a specialty, which means they start with a free skill, and that free skill really kind of, it's a good way to combo their loadout. So if you want to take gunslingers, that means that they can shoot with 2 pistols at the same time. That seems like a great skill to put on somebody that you then want to buy 2 pistol with, for example. Now we'll look at specialties in a minute. Prospects, they are basically the Juves of old. So if a prospect gets taken out of action, no one cares, with the exception of other prospects around them, and they get promoted to, they become real boys at 13 XP. So prospects are quite fun to kind of have out there, and if they get shot at and die, doesn't really matter, but at some point they'll get promoted and get better. Then you've got pets and beasts. So like we said at the beginning, pets and beasts are war gear. So you're not going to be able to fill out your roster by taking a load of croco dogs. But what you can do is you can take them and slap them on with a ganger, and they've got a little buddy. If you've played Pokemon Yellow, imagine that, but invariably with bigger teeth. That's how it works. So pets activate with the owner, and beasts have a lot of limited rules. Basically, pets and beasts, they do fancy little stuff. A lot of them have got their own rules, and this is one of those things where don't think you can fudge it by taking pets and beasts. But if you're taking a pet or a beast, have a look at the rules for them, because some of them do cool stuff. And the list continues. We're nearly done. So brutes. This is wicked. They come with a Juggernaut skill, which means they're only suppressed when wounded. Now, in Standard Munda, if you get shot at and hit, you are suppressed, and that's going to cost you 1 of your actions, basically, which I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm lucky. I've never been shot at, but I imagine I'd lose all of my actions if I was. The other thing is, when a brute dies, they take all of their stuff with them. Now, there's some cool stuff. Brutes, you're obviously thinking Goliaths, but even the Palanite police robot is a brute, which I think works really well. Loner, there are some dudes with loners, so there's a big Goliath stim guy. Can't use their leadership for bottle checks. Basically, when your gang starts losing dudes, you use the highest leadership available to test on your gang. You can't use it of a loner unless the only people left are loners and beasts. Bit of an edge case maybe, but I don't know. I guess you can take like a really heavy croco dog build for Goliaths. Pretty mad. Support do not count towards your crew limits and cannot be targeted with range unless closest targets. Then you've got weirds, which are wizards. So when it comes to some of these more exciting types, if you want to take a weird and use spells, you're going to have to go and read the rules for spells and stuff. Then we've got flying. They fly. That makes sense too. And then you've got hangers on. They can be excluded from random clue selection, and when they die, they take all their stuff with them. They're like mercenaries and things like that. There are more fighter subtypes. So Cawdor have got like fanatics and stuff like this, but we'll kind of cover those when we cover each of the gangs. Because it's time to talk about specialists. Now, in a lot of your core gangs, if you're taking Goliaths or Escher or Orlocks, a lot of your gangers are going to be ganger specialist. And that means that when you build them, when you buy them, you get to choose from a list of good stuff. So on the left here, we've got the type of specialist they are. And in the middle, we've got the skill they get for free. Now, these are skills that I think are pretty much open to everybody to take later on if they want to, but these guys start with them. And we've got a little summary of what these skills do in the grey. So if you're building a roster, you can immediately go, okay, cool. He can be a heavy. That means he gets bulging biceps. And that means when you take a braced shot with a person with bulging biceps, you can move your initiative distance before or after you've shot. So let's take a Goliath with a heavy weapon. He's got his heavy stubber. That basically means he can use bulging biceps. So I'm going to use a double action. I'm going to braced shot, but I can move my initiative before or after I shoot. Now, in this version of Necromunda, it feels like everything's a little bit slower. So being able to still move 3 inches forward, backwards, or whatever while firing a heavy stubber is actually really useful. And if you have a heavy melee weapon, you can also use a secondary weapon, which is pretty cool. So there's a couple of the guys with the big axes. That means that if they've got bulging biceps, you can use a big axe and a small axe at the same time for more axing. So that's cool. Then you've got the gunner specialist, which gives you hip shooting. This is non-heavy ranged weapons. So stuff that isn't heavy, gain assault, so a free shoot with a dash action. Now what this gives you is basically, if you've got a gunner with hip shooting, whether they're firing pistols or basic weapons like a bolt gun or an auto gun, you can use the dash action, which is basically a double action that allows you to use your move distance and then move your initiative distance altogether. So for Escher, that's 8 inches. For Goliath, that's 7 inches. And then you get a free shoot action as part of that with an assault weapon. So some weapons start with assault, so everyone can do that with them. But this basically means you can use your auto gun and move 7 inches and still shoot it from the hip. So that's a really useful weapon for a really useful skill if you want extra mobility. Then you've got gunslinger. If you are a gunslinger, you have the gunfighter rule. I am probably just going to call that gunslinger for all time. And this means you get to use 2 pistols. Well, this means when you shoot, you get to shoot 2 light weapons. They can be at the same target. They can be at different targets. They've got to be aimed at the same time. So you can't go, I'm going to shoot you and then maybe I'll shoot you again. It's very much a case of both guns at you or one each. I love this. I love this in the Eschers from the core set. Just proper 1999 Matrix vibes of Neo wandering around with his big old coat, just shooting lots of guns. It's really cool. I love it. Nice pair of auto pistols, couple of rapid fire shots. It can be wicked. I really do like Gunslinger. Gunslinger and hip shooting are wicked if you like to shoot things. You can take a scout, and the scout gets the clamber skill, and clamber means that when you're climbing stuff that's not easy to climb, you don't have to half your movement. Now, I want to be really clear. If you're climbing a ladder, it's just your movement distance. So if there is a ladder on a wall, you can move 4 inches up or whatever. If you're climbing a wall that doesn't have a ladder, most gangers are going to be going at half speed. So to get up a 3-inch gap, most of them are going to have to take a dash action to get all the way up there, which is a problem. Clamber means you could ignore that. So an Escher with clamber on a dash action is basically just going to go 8 inches up. And if you can find a way to give someone an extra action, like by stimming them or something, then they can just proper Spider-Man it all the way up the ceiling, which is quite cool. And it's going to keep them out of trouble. Height in this game, even though you get 0 height in the box set, I think because movement's a little bit slower, height's going to keep you safe from like being ruffle stomped, I think, a lot of the time. So with my gangs, you'll see me, I can see clamber being useful and just kind of going to a higher place and just repeater needle rifling people. Yeah, I like that. Actually, clamber's pretty good. But if you like to shoot people from a range, the sniper specialism gives you precision shot. And this basically says no save. So if you shoot someone with a ranged action and you roll a 6 to hit with a non-heavy and non-rapid weapon, it ignores all armor. So they don't get a save, which means in this version of the game where saves are kind of... there's not a lot of saves anyway, unless people are in cover. This is wicked. So this means if you've got somebody who's taken a shot and they roll a 6 to hit, so you basically take a braced shot, give you +1, hitting on a 3+. If you roll a 6, they don't even get cover saves. It's just boom, straight shot. Now, I'm a big fan of rapid fire weapons and an even bigger fan of heavy weapons, but actually, I can see that being useful, especially as if you upgrade that person to be a better shot, and that's what you kind of want to do with them. I can see that being okay. Then you've got Brawler. This gives you the Berserker skill, which means you have the Frenzy status. Frenzy's a tough one. It means if you are within range to charge, when you activate that player, they have to try and charge. But if they do charge, they get +1 extra attack as well. In fact, they just get +1 attack. So if you've got somebody who wants to chop things, having that's quite good. I don't like the restriction, but I've not played with Frenzy, so it may be better than I think it is. Then you've got Medic. Medic comes with Medicate, and the Medicate comes with the action Heal Ally. Basically, when you activate, you can use an action if to target a friendly ganger within 1 inch, and they regain 1 wound, but can't be done on seriously injured. So if one of your gangers takes a shot, but they're lightly wounded, you can just make all their problems go away. The Medicate just gives you the ultimate Peppa Pig plaster for you to heal up a wound. And the last of the specialisms is Tech. This becomes a munitioneer skill, and you can distribute ammo action, and all of your friends within 6 inches, you take an intelligence check for them, and if that's passed, they get to immediately reload for free. So you, as the Tech man, use your skill, and then everybody else kind of can get to reload around you, which is going to be really useful sometimes if you're kind of having a bit of a gun line, or you've got a lot of gunslingers with rapid fire weapons that are running out of ammunition. It can be really useful, especially if you've got dudes with heavy weapons who need to make a braced action to shoot. It kind of keeps people firing. And more importantly, if somebody's suppressed as well, it can be really useful to kind of like, okay, you can still do shooting things. You can't just reload. So I can see that one being useful. Now, when it comes to building your gang, and you've got a ganger that's a specialist, these are your options. Hip shooting means you are faster when using guns. Gunfighter means that you can shoot multiple light weapons, multiple light pistols. Even at range 12 in this edition, that's not bad. You're going to get a couple of rounds of shots. I really like Gunfighter, really like hip shooting, and Bulging Biceps is just an absolute winner if you are using heavy weapons. They can just keep moving, very useful, and there's a cool combo there with big old chunky combat weapons too. I can see Scout being useful to redeploy and get to places. Precision shot, yeah, can be fun basically to ignore cover and armor sometimes. Berserker, a bit limited. Medicate and Munitioner, again, they're kind of like combos, so I can see you adding those, but I think that the ones at the top there are going to be the most useful ones. Bulging Biceps, Hip Shooting, and Gunfighter. I think when you're building your list, if you're thinking, want a couple of guys with auto guns, all right, make them gunners. I've got a couple of guys who I want to give heavy weapons to. All right, give them Bulging Biceps. And if you want some lighter, faster guys with a couple of auto guns, a couple of ass pistols or something, then Gunfighter's really good for you. You don't need to overthink it, but it is absolutely going to help you build out your roster and allow your gangers to do the thing that you want them to do. Okay, so we've gone through the basic rules of building your gang. We've not touched on everything. There's all kinds of crazy stuff for all sorts of rosters, including vehicles and big monsters and stuff. It's just so cool. This edition of Necromunda literally has everything, and I think that's so exciting. But we have covered the core bits. We've talked about the restrictions, building a gang. We've talked about when you get to stat stuff later, and we've talked about those types, subtypes, and the benefits and combos you've got. Leaders, champions, being able to co-activate, your gunslingers, being able to fire with 2 pistols, the basics. So if you've watched this video, hopefully, when you're sitting there looking at your gang roster, you can kind of attack it now with a bit more of a plan. But if there is a specific gang you're like, Ben, I want to know about this gang. Let me know, because we're going to be going through the gangs very, very, very soon, because I am very, very hype for Necromunda. So let me know what you think in the comments below. If you've got advice or corrections, drop it in. I want these videos to be a place where we can kind of come to and see what other people have found that works really well, and just making sure that we're sharing our experiences below. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be back soon with more Munda content. Happy gaming.